Sister Mary Kenneth Keller became the first woman in the United States to earn a doctorate in computer science in 1965, a Catholic nun who broke through both gender and institutional barriers in a field that was still defining what it was going to become. Marilyn Monroe was photographed lifting weights in 1952 by Philippa Halsman, an image that subverted every expectation about how a Hollywood glamour icon was supposed to present herself. Her athletic effort captured with the same precision the photographer brought to his most formal portraits. Gerd Müller was one of history's greatest strikers during the 1970s, a West German footballer whose extraordinary goal-scoring instinct in the smallest possible space made him the most feared finisher of his era and the standard against which all subsequent strikers have been measured. Harold Ramis, Catherine O'Hara, and Martin Short appeared together at Comic Relief in 1986, three of the most gifted comic performers of their generation, sharing a stage at a benefit event that combined genuine humanitarian purpose with the particular energy of concentrated comedic talent. Marilyn Monroe was photographed in 1962. Images from the final year of her life, capturing a woman whose public image had become one of the most recognizable in the world, while her private circumstances were becoming increasingly difficult to manage. Salvador Dali and Raquel Welch were photographed together in 1965, the surrealist master meeting one of Hollywood's most visually striking new presences in an encounter between two personalities who each understood the art of creating an unforgettable image. Andrew Ridgeley cut a cake held by George Michael in 1984 to celebrate Wham! Topping the UK singles chart for the first time, two young men at the beginning of a pop career that would make them one of the decade's most commercially successful and instantly recognizable acts. Barbara Eden and her husband, Michael and Sarah, were photographed at home with their son Matthew in 1966, a domestic portrait of the star of I Dream of Jeannie during the height of the show's popularity. Her family life, a world away from the television fantasy she inhabited weekly. In 1951, 4,000 white residents of Cicero, Illinois began a riot after a black family attempted to move into an apartment building. The violence lasted several days and required National Guard intervention, capturing the violent resistance to residential integration in communities outside the Deep South. Shanty houses in the mountains surrounding Lima document how communities organize themselves when city authorities cannot keep pace with population growth. Informal settlements that develop their own infrastructure, commerce, and social organization in the absence of official planning. Marilyn Monroe and Jane Russell were photographed on the set of Gentlemen Prefer Blondes in 1953, two of Hollywood's most magnetic screen presences together on a production that showcased both their considerable comedic gifts and their very different approaches to the art of being a movie star. Female students at Abraham Lincoln High School in Brooklyn protested in 1942 by wearing slacks, staging a collective act of fashion-based solidarity with a classmate suspended for the same attire, challenging rules whose enforcement they found unjust through the most peacefully effective means available. Edna Egbert fought with police officers on the ledge of her Brooklyn home in 1942, officers attempting to prevent a personal crisis from becoming a tragedy, while the street below served as unwilling witness to one person's most desperate moment. Grocery shopping at Red Owl in 1968 captured the consumer world of a regional supermarket chain, the particular combination of product display, pricing, and store design creating a retail environment that felt entirely ordinary then and impossibly nostalgic now. The new housewife look of the late 1960s was documented. Fashion photography capturing a domestic aesthetic that was simultaneously being challenged by the women's liberation movement, gathering momentum in exactly this period. A woman played roulette in vintage Las Vegas, captured in one of the gambling establishments that defined the city's particular combination of glamour, risk, and carefully manufactured excitement during the decades when the casino floor was still genuinely dangerous territory. Conway Twitty, Chubby Checker, and Dick Clark performed the twist together in the early 1960s. A country star, the man who made the dance famous, and television's most powerful pop music gatekeeper, sharing a moment that captured the era's particular crossover energy. Martin Milner was photographed with his Norton Jubilee 250 in 1961, the Route 66 star riding a British motorcycle in his off time, his genuine enthusiasm for two wheels providing a personal counterpoint to the American automobiles that defined his television persona. Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse appeared at Disneyland in 1961, costumed characters greeting visitors at the park that was still in its relatively early years. The Disney brand's most iconic figures providing the most immediate and recognizable connection between the company's animated legacy and its physical theme park. Mick Jagger posed with his new 1966 Aston Martin in 1967. The Rolling Stones frontman photographed alongside one of Britain's most prestigious automobiles during the height of the band's commercial success. His comfortable relationship with expensive luxury is effortless as everything else he did. The Girl in a Fishbowl is a sideshow illusion using projections to make a small woman appear to be living in an average-sized fish tank, a theatrical trick that required both technical ingenuity and a performer willing to inhabit the illusion convincingly for audiences who were both deceived and delighted. Martina and Juan de la Cruz were Filipino sideshow performers and siblings born with dwarfism. Juan was a skilled boxer and the shortest man to register for the World War I draft. While Martina was a gifted linguist who took great pleasure in dressing fashionably throughout her career, William Henry Johnson was photographed in a portrait that captured his warmth and personality. A beloved sideshow performer who built an almost 70-year career and was known throughout his professional life for his genuine kindness to everyone he encountered. Kathy Ireland appeared in a 1987 Sports Illustrated photograph, an image from the swimsuit issue that helped establish her as one of the publication's most recognized faces and launched a modeling career she would later leverage into an extraordinarily successful business portfolio. Sophie Marceau was photographed as a young French model and actress. Early images of a performer who would develop into one of European cinema's most celebrated and internationally recognized presences across the following decades. A young woman posed with a Mercedes-Benz 170 Vise beneath a horse chestnut tree in summer around 1938, a personal leisure photograph that captured both the elegance of the era's automotive design and the particular German aesthetic of a summer afternoon before the war. Street style in the 1940s was documented. Fashion photography from a decade defined by wartime austerity and the particular elegance that women maintained despite material shortages. Their clothing choices navigating the space between practicality and personal expression. Louise Brooks was photographed as a silent movie star in the 1920s, a performer whose precision acting, distinctive personal style, and intense screen presence in both American and German productions created an image that has never entirely faded from cultural memory. Members of the Fleischhacker Swimming Club posed in a Cadillac in San Francisco in 1927, the casual combination of athletic club membership and luxury automobile capturing the particular leisure culture of California's prosperous urban middle class during the decade. Dorothy Sebastian's eyes were captured in a studio portrait by Ruth Harriet Louise in 1929, the photographer's focus on a single expressive feature, producing an image that conveyed personality with an intimacy that full formal portraits of the era rarely achieved. Greta Garbo posed for photographer Nicholas Murray in 1929, studio portraiture of the actress, who was already becoming one of cinema's most discussed and deliberately enigmatic presences, the camera capturing something of the mystery she cultivated so carefully. An original theatrical photograph by Charlotte Fairchild from the mid-1920s preserved a performer in the particular staging and lighting conventions of New York theatrical photography from that era, documentation of a professional world whose visual vocabulary has changed completely in the century since. Clara Bow appeared in a publicity shot for the film Hula in 1927. Promotional photography from the height of a career that had made her silent cinema's most commercially successful star, and the definitive screen embodiment of the 1920s spirit. Lost scenes from the missing reel of Ella Cinders from 1926 were recovered, film fragments from a silent comedy whose incomplete survival represents the broader tragedy of early cinema. Where the majority of films from the era have been permanently lost, Myrna Loy was photographed with a patinated bronze Art Deco sculpture by Edward Marcel Sandoz in 1930. Publicity photography, from the beginning of her transition from supporting roles to the leading career that would make her one of Hollywood's most beloved stars. Actress Laura Lee posed with a 1936 Cord automobile during a Los Angeles Times advertising campaign. Automotive glamour photography, combining the era's most elegantly designed American car with the kind of feminine presence that automobile advertising has always deployed to make its products aspirational. Stella Adler appeared in Love on Toast in 1937, a film credit from a woman who would eventually become far more famous as an acting teacher, whose students included Marlon Brando, Warren Beatty, and Robert De Niro. Actress Frances Farmer posed in Summer Clothes in 1937, a photograph from the same year her resistance to the studio system began the professional and personal conflicts that would define the rest of her troubled and ultimately tragic life. Robert Montgomery posed with his American Austin on the MGM studio lot in Culver City in 1930. A sophisticated young actor in his miniature automobile captured in a promotional image that combined Hollywood glamour with the quirky charm of the era's smallest production car. Lucille Ball appeared in a publicity photo for Stage Door from around 1937 by Ernest Bachrach. Early studio photography of a performer who had not yet found the comedic vehicle that would make her one of American entertainment's most recognizable and beloved figures. Fashion in the 1930s was documented, a decade whose particular aesthetic combined Depression-era economic constraint with an escapist visual language of extraordinary elegance. The movies and fashion of the period creating images of deliberate beauty that felt like a response to difficult times. Mamma Clark spoke with co-star Clark Gable during the filming of Mutiny on the Bounty in 1935, a behind-the-scenes moment from a major Hollywood production that brought together one of the era's biggest stars and a Hawaiian actress in one of the decade's most celebrated historical epics. Putt Mossman performed his famous ladder trick on an Indian 4 motorcycle at Hackney Wick Stadium in London in 1935. a stunt rider balancing on the ladder of a moving motorcycle in one of the most technically demanding and visually spectacular acts in American motorcycle exhibition history. Marilyn Monroe posed at the studio of illustrator Earl Moran in 1946, early modeling work from the beginning of her professional career, images created for the illustrator's commercial work that predated the studio contract, the name change, and everything that followed. Errol Flynn watched Ronald Reagan and read a note in a scene from Desperate Journey in 1942. Two actors whose careers would diverge completely in the post-war years, one becoming a faded Hollywood legend and the other eventually reaching the White House. An early Kodachrome photograph captured Marilyn Monroe posing as a secretary. Color film preserving a modeling session from the early stages of her career before the camera had fully discovered what to do with someone whose relationship with the lens was entirely unlike anyone else's. Hedy Lamarr was photographed backstage during the filming of Samson and Delilah in 1949 on Kodachrome film. Color photography, capturing an actress whose extraordinary beauty was famous, while her co-invention of frequency hopping, spread-spectrum radio technology remained completely unknown. A Kodachrome photograph from the 1940s captured a man with his young son, color film preserving a father and child moment from a decade, otherwise shaped by the enormous disruptions of global conflict. A reminder that ordinary family love continued alongside everything history was demanding. Late 1940s, Marilyn Monroe modeling photographs preserved her early career. Images from before fame, before the studio system, before anything that would distinguish this particular young woman from the thousands of others working as models in post-war Los Angeles. Walter Lantz posed in 1948 with plush versions of Woody Woodpecker, Andy Panda, and Oswald the Lucky Rabbit alongside a Woody Woodpecker painting. The animator who had created these beloved characters, photographed surrounded by the physical embodiments of his most enduring creative work. The Garmsar Salt Cave in Iran features massive salt pillars formed during Achaemenid Empire mining operations between 550 and 330 BC. 27 mines carved by ancient hands, the structures they left behind now drawing visitors to one of the world's most remarkable underground environments. A NASA artist named Rick Guidis imagined a futuristic space colony in the 1970s, a habitat using rotation to simulate Earth's gravity with large mirrors designed to capture and redirect sunlight into the interior, a vision of human life beyond Earth that the era's space program made feel genuinely imminent. The sharp boundary between the lush forest and white sand dunes of Lençóis Maranhenses in Brazil creates one of Earth's most visually striking natural landscapes. Designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2024 for its exceptional geological significance and extraordinary natural beauty. A modified Boeing 747 carried Space Shuttle Endeavour over Los Angeles on September 21, 2012. The shuttle's final ferry flight to its permanent home at the California Science Center, a site that drew hundreds of thousands of Angelinos into the streets and onto rooftops. Sophia Loren posed for Kodachrome photographs by Phil Stern in August 1957 for Look magazine's article on her Americanization, an Italian star being examined through the lens of how Hollywood was reshaping her image for a market whose relationship with European cinema was still being negotiated. A woman in a red Hawaiian pattern robe was captured on Kodachrome slide in 1957. Color photography preserving the particular warmth and visual richness that the film stock was known for. The tropical print carrying the relaxed leisure sensibility of the decade. Sally Field was photographed by Harry Langdon in the 1970s, an actress in the decade when her career was transitioning from the roles of her television years toward the film work that would earn her 2 Academy Awards. Randolph Mantooth and Kevin Ty. Donald Duck appeared with a little girl in 1971, a costumed character encounter at a Disney venue that preserved the particular magic of the moment when a child meets the animated figure they have loved on. Screen and discovers it has somehow arrived in the real world. Freddie Mercury of Queen performed live at Wembley Stadium in 1986, photographed by Dave Hogan, one of rock music's most extraordinary natural performers at the absolute peak of his powers in the year before his condition would begin to limit what was still possible. Apple's merchandise from 1986 captured a company still years from the cultural dominance that would eventually make its logo one of the most recognized symbols on Earth. Branded items from the era when Apple was a niche computer manufacturer with devoted fans but limited mainstream reach. Eddie Van Halen was photographed backstage in 1986. A guitarist whose technical innovations had permanently changed what the electric guitar could do. Captured in the year when the band he anchored was at the commercial peak of its career. The Giant Claw from 1957 remains one of cinema's most inadvertently comedic monster films, a low-budget science fiction production whose central creature was so unconvincingly rendered that cast members reportedly laughed when they first saw it. Audiences today sharing exactly that response. Frank Sinatra married Barbara Marx on July 11, 1976 in Rancho Mirage, his fourth wife joining him at a celebration attended by Ronald Reagan. who took time from his presidential campaign to witness the wedding of one of American entertainment's most enduring and complicated figures. Queen Elizabeth II rode with Governor Michael Dukakis in Boston on July 11, 1976. The British monarch continuing her American bicentennial tour in a city whose own colonial history made the visit particularly resonant. President Gerald Ford attended bicentennial celebrations at Independence Hall in Philadelphia on July 4, 1976, the incumbent president marking America's 200th birthday at the most symbolically appropriate location in the country during an election year that he would ultimately lose. A group of people marched in a gay rights demonstration at the Democratic National Convention on July 11, 1976, activists bringing the movement for equality into the most visible political arena available. Demanding that the party address issues its leadership was still reluctant to fully engage, Queen Elizabeth II visited Boston on July 11, 1976, delivering a speech from the balcony of the old State House near where the Boston Massacre had occurred 2 centuries earlier. The British monarch acknowledging history with a grace that transformed what could have been an awkward colonial moment into a genuine diplomatic achievement. Ronnie James Dio would have turned 84 years old today. The legendary vocalist, who fronted Black Sabbath and Rainbow before building his own band's remarkable catalog, his voice, one of heavy metal's most powerful and emotionally resonant instruments until his death in 2010. 2 Negritos Ada girls of the Philippines were photographed, members of one of the archipelago's indigenous communities, whose ancient presence in the islands predates the arrival of later populations by tens of thousands of years. Albert Einstein was photographed at Lincoln University in 1946, the great physicist visiting a historically black university in Pennsylvania whose students were pursuing education in a country that maintained the racial segregation that Einstein publicly condemned. Throughout his American years, children smiled as Marilyn Monroe visited their neighbor around September 1952. A casual encounter between ordinary kids and a rising star who was simultaneously promoting a film and competing as Miss America, her natural warmth with children evident in every face in the photograph. Mary McLeod Bethune dedicated over 50 years of her life to the education of black youth, leaving behind a legacy expressed in her own words about faith, racial dignity, harmony, and responsibility to young people that has continued to inspire generations of educators and civil rights advocates. 2 ladies posed together for a glass negative portrait in the 1890s, formal Victorian photography, producing an image of extraordinary clarity from 2 women whose names have not survived, attached to the image, but whose friendship is visible in the comfortable closeness of their posing. A dance group posed for a photograph in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1945 on Agfa safety film. Performers captured in a moment of collective professional pride. Color photography, preserving both the energy of their shared work and the particular warmth of post-war American artistic community. Michelangelo Antonioni's La Ventura from 1960 was captured in a film still, a landmark of Italian cinema whose deliberate pacing and modernist examination of alienation and desire divided its Cannes audience, but became one of the most studied and discussed films of the 20th century. Bernardo Bertolucci's The Dreamers from 2003 was captured in a film still. A director's meditation on the Paris of 1968 filtered through the intensity of a personal and political awakening shared by 3 young people inhabiting the same apartment during the May Revolt. Billy Wilder's Some Like It. Hot from 1959 was captured in a film still, a comedy so perfectly constructed and performed that it has never been surpassed as an example of the form. Its combination of wit, physical comedy, and genuine feeling remaining impossible to improve upon. Frances Langford passed away on July 11, 2005, a singer and entertainer who had spent decades performing for American troops during wartime, her voice and genuine warmth making her one of the most beloved entertainers of the USO era. The Man Called X debuted on radio on July 10, 1944, an espionage drama that brought the world of international intelligence and wartime mystery to American radio audiences at a moment when the real conflict it dramatized was approaching its decisive phase. Dick Orkin was born on July 9, 1933, a radio personality and advertising creative whose distinctive voice and comedic sensibility made him one of the medium's most recognized and celebrated performers. Across several decades of American broadcasting, Alexei Romanov was photographed with his cousin Princess Ileana of Romania, 2 children of European royalty connected by blood and completely unaware of the very different fates that awaited them, one dying with his family in a cellar in 1918 and the other living until 1991. Syd Barrett died on July 7, 2006 from diabetes complications at age 60. The singer, songwriter, and guitarist who co-founded Pink Floyd was active as a rock musician for only about 7 years before mental illness took him into the seclusion he maintained for the rest of his life. Jimmy McHugh was born in Boston on July 10, 1894, one of the most prolific songwriters from the 1920s through the 1950s, who wrote over 500 songs recorded by artists including Chet Baker, Bing Crosby, Marlene Dietrich, and Frank Sinatra. Sandy West was born in Long Beach, California on July 10, 1959. The Runaways drummer who co-founded with Joan Jett the first teenage all-girl hard rock band to achieve widespread commercial success, creating a template for female rock musicians that has never stopped being relevant. Mitch Mitchell was born in Ealing, Middlesex on July 9, 1946. The drummer best known for his work in the Jimi Hendrix Experience, chosen for the role by coin toss over Ainsley Dunbar in a moment of chance that produced one of rock music's most celebrated rhythm sections. Zanziman Eli is a Rwandan man born around 1999 with microcephaly who spent years hiding in the jungle after being bullied mercilessly by villagers. His story reached the world through social media and brought both international attention and genuine human support to someone who had been entirely isolated. A car bomb destroyed a Renault owned by Nazi hunters Serge and Bette Klarsfeld outside their home in France on July 9, 1979. An unsuccessful assassination attempt targeting two of the most determined and effective pursuers of Nazi war criminals in post-war history. Penagos, a 22-year-old tribeswoman in the Amazon rainforest of Brazil, was photographed in 1997, a member of an indigenous community whose way of life represented one of the last sustained connections between human beings and the natural systems that industrial civilization has spent centuries dismantling. Toru Satano was born in Hokkaido, Japan on July 10, 1938. An actress, an exotic dancer, whose most celebrated role in Faster Pussycat Kill Kill became a cult classic. Her combination of physical presence and screen authority making her one of exploitation. Cinema's most enduring and genuinely commanding figures. Italian Marines disembarked into Brook Harbor on July 11, 1942, soldiers arriving in a port city that had already changed hands multiple times during the North African campaign. Its strategic importance making it one of the most contested locations in the Desert War,